Are we ready to do this? Have you had enough fun with your Dune popcorn bucket? I'll give you a few seconds more. Now that you're done cleaning yourself up, my name is Ren, and this is my review of Dune Part 2. Welcome back, film family. You all know how much I adore the first Dune, so for the past 2.5 years, I've been filled with nothing but excitement and anticipation for Part 2, where we continue to follow the mythic journey of Paul Atreides as he unites with Chani and the Fremen while on a revenge path against the conspirators who destroyed his family. Facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the known universe, Paul endeavors to prevent a terrible future only he can foresee. Because of my undying love for the original Dune, and really Denis Villeneuve's entire filmography, the levels of anticipation and hype for this sequel feel unattainable. And yet, while Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1 achieved undeniable greatness, Dune Part 2 somehow manages to dwarf its predecessor in every conceivable way. Much like Part 1, on a technical standpoint, Dune Part 2 is a flawless achievement. From the sound design to the grandiose vistas all through the film, the sense of immersion and being taken to a completely different universe grabs hold of you from the very first frame to the last. It's a dominant force of a generational sci-fi epic that literally explodes onto the big screen, cinematically firing on all cylinders. The perfect marriage between sci-fi spectacle and soulful character journeys. How Denis Villeneuve ebbs and flows all these story threads, perfectly paying off every single story thread dangling at the end of Part 1. Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 are very much two sides of the same coin. Yet this side of that coin is much more grandiose, it's darker, it's bolder, and distinctively bloodier, showcasing Denis Villeneuve's visionary storytelling skills as he effortlessly interweaves all his narratives between the existential pull of destiny and Paul's fear to embrace the power fabled to be his in a tragic and soulful sci-fi epic on corruption, blind fanaticism, and a tricky balance between being who we are and being what other deem us to be. What works so well in the first Dune is how we're, along with Paul, being brought into this brand new world, but Dune Part 2 sweeps us right off our feet and we're embedded into this culture, the customs of the Fremen, their traditions, their religion, all these names that we're not at all familiar with, but through the course of this film, we begin to see the magnitude, the importance of it all, and we're so immersed into everything, it gives us a completely different understanding on this universe and the people Paul himself is surrounded with. Because of this, while the gargantuan scale and scope of the original Dune are carried flawlessly onto the sequel, Dune Part 2 feels the uniquely more intimate film in feel, allowing for much more soul-stirring performances from a masterful ensemble, quite literally maturing on screen for us all to see. From a magnetic Timothée Chalamet, whose commanding presence dwarfs that of on-screen legends, his work here is nothing but astonishing. He has obviously been building a name for himself for years now, but Dune Part 2 might just be his best work yet. And an emotionally vulnerable Zendaya as Chani, whose silence speaks so much louder than her words. It's unlike any of her previous work that I have seen, and it really builds her character up to more layers as it adds to Paul's journey as much as he adds to hers. And the romance between them is beautiful. It's genuinely heartfelt and it's earned all through the film. The biggest surprise, however, is the unsettlingly quiet yet ravenous turn from Austin Butler as Fade Routha, who at least to me has become the defining antagonist of this franchise. This dude is just straight up creepy, he is brutal, and the way they choose to introduce him in Getty Prime, all those sequences are just burned into my mind. The entirety of Dune 2 is riddled with instant classic shots, set pieces. This film has easily one of the greatest fight scenes I have ever seen, where everything is just stripped down to raw intensity and tension. A perfect set piece with no sound besides the grunts of the fighters and the knives as they clash. That is not to say the sound design isn't mesmerizing, because it is, as is Hans Zimmer's score. What I love so much about such a masterful composer as his, with a historic filmography under his belt, is that somehow in Dune, he feels like he is experimenting with what he can do. What are the limitations of film composing to fit into these unreal creative sci-fi worlds full of imagination. And Hans Zimmer just experiments with what he can do, what he is known for, what he established in the original Dune. And at certain points, he goes just full on rock and roll, and it doesn't take you out of the immersion. It just brings you deeper into the world. And since we are discussing the technical aspects of Dune Part 2, all the praise must be given to the jaw-dropping work of Craig Fraser. His mesmerizing camera work captures this entire universe in so many instantly iconic ways, from sweeping wides, war sequences, battles, grand ships descending on planets, entire cultures, and their day to day living, to more intimate, vulnerable moments in close ups. Every single shot in this film conveys a mood and a feeling of the entire film, to so perfectly convey it from shot to shot, from moment to moment. It is all his work, and I will never get tired of just looking at how gorgeous this film is. There's really no weak link in this cast, a cast that just added onto the perfection of the original, from Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, Dave Batista, Stella Skaarsgard, Leah Seydoux, and somehow makes the plot pacier, the stakes are higher, the characters are richer, and have deeper arcs throughout this film. Even some surprising names that unfortunately were spoiled for some, myself included. There is something done with a specific character and a voice, let's say, and I'm not sure if it was slightly sillier than the film intended it to be. All of that to say that I love Dune Part 2 because of how well Part 1 worked for me. If you felt the original Dune was all setup, this Dune is all payoff. That being said, there is a whole lot more of Dune. So if you did not care for the original Dune, I don't feel Dune Part 2 is the film that will convert you. Dune Part 2 is an expansion in every conceivable way on the first film. There is certainly more action. There are sprinkles, spices of elements of horror, particularly because of Fade Routha and his dynamic with his family, with the Emperor, with Paul Atreides, how the music bleeds into each scene whenever he's on screen. There is more romance, there is more political intrigue, and because there are so many more characters, many more dynamics to explore. That allows the characters to be richer, but there's a sense of being overwhelmed by just how much this film does. And it does it all excellently for me. But it is a film that just gives and gives and gives more to the audience. And I specifically use the word overwhelming because it's the kind of film that demands multiple experiences watching it, with just so much to absorb, so much to love, from a technical, writing, performance, directing standpoint, Dune Part 2 just offers everything it could to its audience, and it's one of the best reasons why I love it so much. Denis Villeneuve has proved time and time again to be a masterful filmmaker, one that respects his audience's intelligence, rewards their attention, and that has never been more clear than with his passion projects, Dune Part 1 and Part 2. Thought-provoking, auteur sci-fi epics with unprecedented scale, unprecedented richness in their narratives, in their characters, and we get to witness them in all their glory with his stamp of approval, his signature style and sensibilities all over it. Seriously, witness this film in IMAX with the best sound quality possible. I will never forget my first experience with Dune Part 2. It's the kind of filmmaking that reminds me why I love movies. But enough about me gushing about Dune Part 2. It's time for you to start the conversation in the comments below. Are you a fan of the original Dune? Have you read the book? Are you excited for Dune Messiah if we get it? Because for some reason, Warner Brothers just hasn't announced it yet. Anything and everything down there. If you're enjoying this review, check out my review for the original Dune. Check out my review for whenever I had Dune Part 2 on my most anticipated movies of the year, because it kept getting delayed. And if you enjoyed this review, you want to talk more movies and TV with me, this is the place to be. Consider clicking that subscribe button, and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. Dune Part 2 is a grandiose achievement in thought-provoking, tragic sci-fi storytelling. An undeniable masterwork of a visionary filmmaker whose breathtaking visuals and set pieces and soul-stirring cast offer an overwhelmingly mesmerizing cinematic experience. It is, in one word, glorious. I'm giving Dune Part 2 an A. Thank you so much for watching, Film Family. Remember to start the conversation about Dune Parts 1 and 2 in the comments below, and let me know what's the dirtiest thing you've done with your Dune popcorn bucket. I really want to know. I'll be back very soon with more videos, so until the next one, love each other and love the movies.